Good morning, class. Let's take a brief look at some job interview tips for acing the interview. Let me start with the first one here. Do your research. I think I mentioned this earlier. One thing that's going to really make you stand apart from the crowd is to use your ability to use what you've been learning in school to research and to analyze, to actually look into a company, to figure out what it is they're looking for. What's their background? What's their origin? What does the company seem to value? What are some things that they consider to be successful in that company? What are some of the downfalls of it, etc. Not only is this going to be good for the you view to show the interviewer that you care about the company, but it's also going to be helpful for you because you may not even want to work for this company. Once you start to look into maybe some news coverage about them, or you start to look at what some people are saying about them online, that's why it's really important to study the company and the history not only online on their webpage, but also by asking people, doing some research, looking into news stories about that company, doing a Google search, putting that company in as your search term. So then you can show them that you understand the company, understand what's important to them. Let's take a look now at the next one, which is the first impression. Considering the first impression that you're fostering. Excuse me, sorry about that. Okay, dressing the part. Now, this always comes down to audience purpose and context. Most people will say you should always dress professionally in the business world when you're going for an interview. I don't think that's always the case. I think there's certain contexts where professional dress is much less valued than other contexts. But what you should always do is dress in an outfit that's appropriate to the job that you want to be doing. So if you're going to be looking into doing some work in like a business field where you've got a lot of clients that you're going to be working with and entertaining, then you might want to wear a suit. Yes, but if you're looking into doing some work at, like Summerfest or something for the summer and you're talking to someone, you may not need to get so dressed up for the part. Just think specifically about the type of work that you're going to do and the clothes that are necessary for that type of work. Let's take a look at the handshake. This is the real first impression that someone's going to have of you in the interview. They're going to use this to judge your confidence. They're going to use this to judge how you feel about other people and how you work with other people. They're going to use this to judge your personality and your attitude. A lot of times, who does a lot of interviews is an expert at determining that based on a handshake that somebody is, for example, really domineering, or based on a handshake that somebody is really shy or timid. And again, there are certain jobs where it's okay to be shy or timid, but if you're going to be interviewing for a job where you're going to be working with a lot of people, or you're going to need to express a lot of authority and maybe a disciplinary type of job, they're not going to want to see this timid, fishy handshake, this dead fish type of thing. But if you do want to apply for a job, you need to be thinking about what type of impression you're making by the way you're shaking the person's hand. Just professional courtesy. Wait to be offered a seat before sitting down. That's something that seems somewhat minor, but I think it can speak volumes to your courtesy and to how much somebody believes that you respect them. You show that you respect them and that you're going to follow their lead for now. They offer you a seat, then you sit down. Smile and be confident. That's basic. You can always fake confidence. You can fake confidence in interviews. You can fake confidence in presentations by standing up straight, speaking clearly, speaking slowly, and allowing yourself some silences. A lot of times, if you don't exactly know what to say, the tendency is to fill that silence with like, and that's not going to do much for your first impression. That's not going to make you come across as very articulate. So be okay with having a few seconds of silence. It's completely normal when somebody asks you a question in an interview to give it a few seconds of silence, to think through it, and then respond to it. Okay, you're going to have one of the first questions in most cases that you're going to have is the tell me about yourself question in the interview. Now, one thing you need to do is you need to analyze the purpose of this question in the first place. In many cases, this question is asked to make the person that's being interviewed comfortable. The theory is that it's really easy to talk about yourself. It's also kind of a way to break the ice. They don't get necessarily into the hard-hitting questions right away, not into the questions that take a lot of thought and that have right and wrong answers. However, you should use the tell me about yourself question to take advantage of every available opportunity of persuasion. So do what you can to tie your personal story, your personal values, what matters to you, what's important to you, what your experiences are, and what your history is to the job itself. Talk about your passion for the job. For example, I've been passionate about teaching others ever since I started my first tutoring job when I was a sophomore in college. So there, you're telling us about yourself. You're telling us that you started tutoring. You might want to mention where you went to college, etc. But you're also working in there a passion. You're also expressing your passion for the job you're interviewing for. Now, interviewing is one of the best places to practice the you attitude. Remember what I talked about in the you attitude with the resume and the cover letter? You always have to talk about how your experiences are going to benefit the company, not how the company is going to benefit you. The same is true for the interview itself. You need to express what the company values first and then work yourself into that. Okay, so in the tell me about yourself question, you might say something like, I know this company prides itself in customer service, and I learned a lot about service during my time as a sales associate at Best Buy. That answer might be in other questions aside from tell me about yourself, but it could be in the tell me about yourself question. But again, you'll notice that they're putting the value of the company first, and then they are working their own experience into it, talking about how I fit into your company rather than your company fits into me or fits me. Stay focused. Mention only details relevant to the job or your field, or details that talk about how you are as a person and what you value and what's important to you. So there's going to often be tough questions that people ask you. They want to see how you think on your feet. They want to see your critical thinking ability, your analytical ability. So the best thing to do is to find what you think some of the toughest questions are going to be and anticipate those before the interview and practice some answers. You don't necessarily have to write the answers down, but just have it in your mind how you may respond to something like, why should I hire you? Or what is your long-range objective? Or how has your education prepared you for a career? That's an interesting one. They want to see you be able to apply what you've learned to what you're doing now. Have you ever had a conflict with a boss or professor? This is a tricky situation because you don't want to completely avoid it because that's going to seem suspicious, right? You don't want to say, I've never had a conflict. What this question is, they want to figure out in this question is, how do you handle conflict and how do you resolve it? So one thing you need to do as you prepare for interview questions is think about the questions below the questions. So this one, for example, have you ever had a conflict with a boss or professor? The question really is how do you handle and resolve conflict? That's what they want to figure out. And you can often explain that by using a specific example. Whenever they ask any type of question about what is your weakness or what do you want to improve upon in your life, etc., don't avoid saying a weakness, but say a weakness very briefly. And then spend more time answering that question about how you overcame that weakness or how you're working to overcome that weakness. So that's the what is your greatest weakness one. Let me give you an example. Someone might ask you what is your greatest weakness in the job interview. You might say something like, sometimes I get overwhelmed when there's multiple tasks that I have to do, but I've learned to overcome that lately because I have just recently bought a calendar and assignment book, and I've been writing a lot of these things down, and it's really helped. So you see how I addressed what my weakness was, but then I spent more time talking about what I'm doing to overcome it. So the underlying question beneath what is your greatest weakness is essentially, how do you overcome weakness? This is an interesting one. I haven't seen this too much, but this was listed as one of the top 50. If you had to live your life over again, what one thing would you change? Again, this is a question that is designed for you to express a weakness, but then talk about how you're going to overcome that weakness. So the underlying question there is, what are you doing to improve yourself? And you need to express what you're doing to improve yourself. You need to have specific examples of things that you're doing. One thing that's really good for answering these is to have some kind of a plan, to give them some sense that you have a goal to improve yourself. So maybe you might say something like, well, my greatest weakness is that I am not very disciplined when it comes to working out, for example. However, I have recently put a plan together and working with a personal trainer that I'm going to start working out 2 days a week and then eventually move it to 3 days a week. If you provide them with a concrete and detailed plan about how you're going to overcome something, that's one of the best ways, I think, to answer that question. I said this before, this is going to be something that really makes you stand out, is your storytelling ability, your use of examples. You should have one or two examples prepared for every interview question you anticipate. That enhances the development of your answers and makes them more convincing. It also sets you apart from the rest of the candidates because most of the candidates just stay at the surface level. And they say something like, I am a team player, for example. Well, but you got to give us several stories that reveal to us, that show us that you're a team player. So as I said, try to use at least one example for every question if it's possible. Think in terms of behavior when it comes down to, so instead of like what do you believe or what do you know, think about what do you do. Ending the interview, your one thing that's going to really make you stand out is if you have questions prepared for your interviewer. That reveals that, one, you've researched the company. It also reveals that it's very important for you to learn about this other person, that you're others focused. It's very much that you attitude that you have. And then it also leaves that final impression where you just follow up with, you just say something like, I'm really interested in your company. I would love to contribute to it. I know that it's very important for you to do blah, blah, blah. And then you express what their values are based on what you determine in your research. And then again, you fit yourself into it. So that's kind of like how you conclude the interview. So always have questions ready. Very thoughtful questions, and have several, 3, 4, 5 questions, because sometimes they're going to answer those questions before you can even ask them. And you want to always have some questions. The worst thing you can do is have no questions at all. Follow up. Always respond a couple of days later with a thank you note or an email, letting them know you're still interested in the position. You want to thank them for their time. You know that they're busy and that they took a lot of time out of doing their work to talk to you. Be very you attitude, you view about it. And have the confidence to assume you're going to see them again. In the end of that email, you might say something like, I look forward to talking with you again. Not necessarily I look forward to working with you because it's a little too confident, but I look forward to hearing from you again. So there's a couple of tips about interview. Good luck with this. Talk to you later.